Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. My name is Dennis Paul. I'm a board member of World of Words Literary Festival, and I'm also a member of the Literary Committee. I'm delighted to see everyone here tonight. Thanks again to our lead sponsors, Delse, the Heritage French luggage brand, as well as the Jan Mikowski Foundation. Tonight we're here. We're here in the village of Gstaad in Switzerland for an evening author talk entitled Family Matters, Reimagining the Past, with award-winning author Avni Doshi. She's an acclaimed Indian-American author whose literary debut, Burnt Sugar, is a novel that explores the tumultuous relationship between a mother and a daughter in contemporary India, and was shortlisted for the Booker Prize and also won the Sushila Devi Award. Born in New Jersey to Indian parents, Avni grew up immersed in both American and Indian cultures. After completing her education in art history at Barnard College, not far from where Thomas and I work, and University College of London, Avni went into the art world, but fortunately for all of us, she eventually turned to writing. Burnt Sugar is a powerful novel that explores the fraught and complex relationship between a mother, Tara, and a daughter, Antara. The story delves into themes of memory, resentment, and identity. As Tara begins to suffer from dementia, Antara is forced to confront their troubled past, marked by neglect and unconventional choices. The novel, which the FT called brave and unflinching, The Guardian called beautifully written and unsettling, and the New York Times described as skillfully portraying the cyclical nature of memory and its capacity to haunt us, is a raw and evocative examination of the bonds that tie us to our family, even when those ties are fraught with pain and misunderstanding. Please help me give a warm welcome to Avni Doshi. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So we saw earlier in our discussions this morning that we have a number of aspiring writers in the audience. And so I imagine that those authors, aspiring authors, struggle with that first page, the first sentence of the first page. And so I wanted to know, how did you come up with the opening lines of Burnt Sugar, which have been commented by many as a very strong opening? And I have my copy if you want to read that first line.
Yeah.
Shall we have it read a couple lines?
Sure. I'd love to. So this is the first page of the book. I would be lying if I said my mother's misery has never given me pleasure. I suffered at her hands as a child, and any pain she subsequently endured appeared to me to be a kind of redemption, a rebalancing of the universe, where the rational order of cause and effect aligned. But now I can't even the tally between us. The reason is simple. My mother is forgetting, and there is nothing I can do about it. There is no way to make her remember the things she has done in the past, no way to baste her in guilt. I used to bring up instances of her cruelty, casually, over tea, and watch her face curve into a frown. Now she mostly can't recall what I'm talking about. Her eyes are distant with perpetual cheer. Anyone witnessing this will touch my hand and whisper, "Enough now, she doesn't remember. Poor thing." The sympathy she elicits in others gives rise to something acrid in me.
Thank you. So your mother is sitting in the front row. I had the pleasure of meeting her, so I know this is not an autobiographical book. It's definitely not about your mother. But how do you, from the craft as an author, how do you arrive at that beginning? How do you start this novel, and why do you start it there? And then also I'd love to understand, if this isn't your mother, who is this character and dynamic, and where does it come from?
Coming to this starting point in the novel was not something that happened overnight. When I first started writing the book, which was in, I think it was 2012, although, I looked back into my emails and I have like a couple of character sketches, even from 2010. So this was definitely kind of in the background for me for a very long time, and the initial drafts of the novel started in a completely different way. The first draft of the novel was told from the perspective of the narrator when she was a child, and the entire novel kind of went through the childhood of this character. And subsequent drafts took on completely other, completely other stories. In fact, there was one draft which was like a partition story. It went into the entire partition of India and Pakistan, and it became a story of the grandparents. And it became this kind of epic narrative with so many characters and aunts and uncles and extremely complex. And that, of course, I immediately kind of had to discard. But I realized, and I thought every time, so I went through about 8 drafts over the course of 7 years, each one completely different than the one before. And at the end of every draft, I would look at it and I would say, this is garbage. I mean, it was so disappointing, and I would throw it in the bin, and I would say, I quit, I'm crap at this, I don't want to do this, and I'm going to go back to art history. And then a few months would pass, and these characters were just kind of there haunting me, And so then I would go back and I would start again. There was kind of an interesting amnesia that would take place, and I would forget the struggle of the last draft and begin again. And each draft sounded very different, the voice was very different, and I just felt like I couldn't catch hold of that narrative voice that I wanted. And I remember with this draft that finally was published, I was just defeated. I think I was at a kind of, creative rock bottom. And then sitting by myself in my study, I heard a voice. And it was really strong, and it was like this sentence just sort of emerged from that voice.
The sentence you just read.
The sentence I just read, and she sounded cruel, she sounded a little bit in pain, she sounded angry. But there was also kind of a poetry I could hear. And I knew it. I kind of knew it immediately. I put the sentence down and I said, okay, this is the voice. This is the voice that can carry me through. And I think previously when I've thought about all the discarded drafts, I've had this sense of sort of, oh God, I had to fail so many times. There had to be so much failure before I could actually get to something worthwhile. But I look at it quite differently now. I think in a way all those drafts were a preparation, and it was necessary to write into all those different eras. It was necessary to write into that history, into that ancestry for me, so that finally when I came to the last draft, there was sort of this fluency. I didn't have an outline. I didn't, once I was at the last draft, I felt I was sort of just writing. So it was a kind of a strange journey, a little bit unexpected, but that's really how the first sentence came about.
And you say that you were uncovering the novel in a sense through these drafts. Were you uncovering Taro and Antara, those characters? What were you uncovering about yourself? Because it sounds like a lot of your process of writing is self-exploration. If you're not telling the story of your mother and you, whose story are you telling? How does this reflect you? How are you getting into your own psyche through these drafts and through developing these characters?
So the first scene that I wrote of the novel, I remember I was in my grandmother's house. I was in Pune, which is the city in Western India where the novel is set. And she has a little, she's passed away now, but she has a little terrace in that apartment where actually she hangs all the clothes to dry once they've been washed. And I was out there, I don't usually tell this part, but I was smoking a cigarette out there. And there's a kind of glass, there was a ledge and a pane of glass. And in the glass, there was some kind of discoloration or like a dapple cutting through the glass. And I remember looking through it and seeing the face of a woman that was sort of chopped in two by this, almost like like a stroke of lightning or something. And I couldn't tell, was I looking at the face of one woman or was I looking at the face of two? Was I hallucinating? What was happening here? Was it my own reflection? And I couldn't get that image out of my mind. And it was like suddenly this image of a face turned into these two women sitting on a balcony similar to that. And they were talking. And one of them was smoking a cigarette. And I could tell they were related to each other, but I couldn't tell who was the mother and who was the daughter. There was something in them. They were combative, they were belligerent, there was clearly some intimacy and love, but I couldn't really tell what they were to each other. And then I began to write the first scene, and that's when I kind of started to discover, and it really was an experience of deep discovery because I didn't know anything. I think when I came to the page, there was this deep feeling of not knowing what this was, not knowing where I was. I had no idea that I was writing even a chapter of a novel.
You didn't see yourself as a writer?
I didn't see myself as a writer. No, I mean, I never studied writing. I never took a single writing class. I studied art history, which, you do a lot of writing, but it's, not very, I never found it to be that kind of creative and exploratory. So I didn't really know what I was doing. And it was through those kind of initial encounters with these two characters that the rest of the story came. And I guess you could say that it was a psychic exploration because I kind of had a vision or something come through me at that moment, and I wasn't sure who they were.
That's sort of similar to what Louise was talking about earlier today, this idea that the character or the scene, I think Louise said that, two characters from two different books, that they just sort of drop down and that all of a sudden that's the starting point. You have this vision or you have an image. So is it more vision or more craft or some combination of both for you?
I'm sure it's a combination of both. I feel for me like one of the things we don't talk about as much as writers, but I like to think about a lot, is the mystery of the kind of initial kernel of where something comes from. Where, Georgi mentioned that nightmare, which I found really powerful because for me, I've been writing my dreams down almost religiously since about 2014. And my dreams are somewhere that I go very regularly for images, for characters. I'm working on a book now, and while I can't say too much about what it's about, for a long time I thought I'm writing about three separate things. I have kind of three separate books going. And I was so frustrated because I couldn't figure out which one of these topics do I really want to focus on, which one of these characters do I want to focus on. And it was sort of driving me crazy. And I remember walking one night, and it was under a full moon, just saying, and suddenly these three seemingly very disparate things suddenly like braided together very gently in my mind, and I was like, oh, okay, this is the same book, and I sort of I had no clue about it. And there's a way in which I found working on the book and working on the material and working on the text has often gotten me nowhere. And there's a lot of kind of waiting, and there's a lot of allowing and getting out of the way. I have to play a lot of tricks on myself to sort of step aside and let things emerge.
What kind of tricks?
Oh gosh, I mean, I have to meditate, I have to do all kinds of things. I have to, there's a lot of relaxation, different kinds of somatic techniques to sort of get me more into the body and out of my mind, because I find I can become extremely critical and judgmental of everything that I'm writing. And that's what can stop me. And
that's going to inhibit your ability to advance the book. You talk about this idea of the difficulty of inhabiting these characters. I think that's also what you're getting at now. Why is it so difficult to inhabit these characters? When I first started reading the book, the characters are so real to me. I, of course, projected that this was autobiographical, that there's parts of your own family history, your grandmother, your mother, you, that are in there. I walked away, obviously getting to know you, understanding that that's not the case. But how do you create characters this three-dimensional and so real? How do you get through, I guess, those challenging parts that you said you've had trying to inhabit those characters?
Yeah, I think it was really a question of time. I mean, it was really giving the book the time, the space, the kind of air it needed to breathe, because I think, for me, when I'm writing, I want to feel that the characters have a kind of psychic autonomy. I don't want to feel that I'm going in and as I'm, working on a scene, I'm kind of forcing this one to do this, and now what's going to happen when this character encounters the other. I want them to almost act in ways that are not me and that I wouldn't expect. And in fact, I want to be surprised. To be quite honest with you, when I got to the end of the book, and especially, the final few scenes, I was shocked. I was shocked at where it was going. I kind of had to stop and put it away and step aside and say, okay, this is not what I wanted, this is not really where I wanted the book to go, and I had to kind of distinguish between what I wanted and what the story wanted. And so I think at some point, the story really starts to feel alive. It almost starts to crackle with its own life, and you can sense that the story has its own intelligence, and it's kind of taking you in a place where, it doesn't fit the outline. It doesn't fit necessarily what you anticipated.
So interesting. And what was the biggest challenge that you faced as you got to the end of the book? Or as you got, I don't know, any point in the book? What was the biggest challenge you faced trying to get through those sections of the book where you had an outline, as Louise walked us through in her creative writing workshop? You had an outline, you had a plan for the book, and it was going in a different direction. Or was it not a challenge? Were you just happy or relieved that it was going in a new direction that felt right?
Well, I didn't know exactly where to end the book. I was a little uncertain, where do I end the story? I had to kind of resist my urge to tie a neat bow around things and have there be like this sense of completion, like everything is going to end up sort of perfectly resolved for all the characters. And I had to kind of live with that, not having a kind of clean resolution for everyone, and the fact that maybe felt closer to something true, that we're not given these neat and tidy resolutions in life. So I guess one place where I struggled was sometimes it was a little bit hard to go into the really dark places. Motherhood is a kind of important theme in the novel, and one of the characters, she goes through postpartum depression, and she has various experiences in her marriage, and so some of those kind of darker moments were they took a little more of me maybe to inhabit.
Because you're not obviously that kind of mother. There's really dark moments in this book related to motherhood. I mean, the mother really is struggling with emotions of not caring at all about her children, and it's pretty severe.
I have to say though, I think maternal ambivalence is very real. I think every mother feels, I would argue, deep maternal ambivalence. I think there's this kind of powerful tension between, love and hate that exists in all of us as we kind of relate to our children. And there's also this deep loss of self, really. You become a mother, and all the other identities that you hold as kind of core to who you are, they sort of are destabilized in some way or another. And it's a profound reckoning. And it's easy to kind of project all of that on this child or project it anywhere else in the world, and it's a very difficult thing to contain that tension, I think. So I wouldn't want to say that I'm not that mother. I would want to say that I have that mother in me, and I work hard to contain her every day.
There's also a lot about the relationship between the husband and the wife, the daughter character, in the book is interesting. There's not a tremendous amount of love between the two of them.
Mm.
And you were going through your own divorce, I think, or separation and eventual divorce.
Yeah.
Or headed towards divorce.
Yeah. I wonder if I was foreshadowing.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah.
How much of you and your own personal story is in that relationship in the book?
I think, my ex-husband probably resented the fact that people would come up to him and say, so is that you? Are you really like that? Like, that guy's a loser. So there was kind of probably a bit of that that's a bit, I guess, tough for anyone who's married to a writer or any creative person. There's always a kind of wanting to assume that things are a certain way. For me personally, though, I think I never wanted to see my marriage as anything like the marriage in the novel at all. I never wanted to see that. It probably was more like the marriage in the novel than I would have liked to admit, but I always, I think, took great pride in being a good wife. And so when that kind of core identity was snatched away, it was, I would say, probably the most crushing thing. It's something I clung to. Yeah, I don't know if it's growing up as a kind of good Indian girl, but I really clung to
that role.
That role, more than any other, I think, more than the good daughter, the good mother, the good writer, any of that. I think I really took pride in being a good wife. So I'm not answering your question, but I'm just kind of confessing to you all that I went through this major repositioning of who I am internally. Yeah.
There's a lot of psychological influence or psychological study in the characters and in your work. It feels less to me like writing as a science, but more as like, to push again on this point of like psychological, whether it's your own family or looking at other families or families that you know, family dynamics. It's a lot of, it seems like it's been influenced a lot by sort of personal struggle, personal psychological evaluation or reevaluation. Do you feel that way, or is that inaccurate?
Yeah, and I think it's also, it's imagining into, for me, there's the life that we all live, and then there's the unlived life. There's the path that you take, and then there's kind of the paths not taken. And something interesting in creative work for me is that ability to live that, in some way, in some kind of imaginary way, to let your mind go to the place that you fantasized about. And what I have found is there's always a lot of energy in those places. There's kind of these, there's a lot of psychic energy, I would say, in that unlived life. And I think that's because we're all kind of really striving for a kind of wholeness, and the older we get and the more choices we make in life, the more we have to kind of limit in a way and narrow who we are and how we engage with the world and how we relate to the world. And I think that exploring those other sides, those kind of sides that we relegate to the shadows or that we kind of put in that box of regret, or to kind of go there and really sit with that and sit with the people we could be or might be or used to be in those situations. For me, that's very exciting. It's kind of it's almost like an ability to kind of live multiple lives or inhabit these multiple spaces. And Georgi spoke so eloquently about empathy, and I think it really, that's where fiction really expands us and transforms us. And I think even the exercise of living into something in an imaginary capacity is expansive. I don't think we have to live something in a material way to be changed by it. I think that there can be. I've been changed by dreams. I've woken up from dreams that have been so deeply archetypal that I'm not the same on the other side of that night's sleep. I'm also a person who believes as much in what happens at night as I do in what happens during the day. So I think for me, the dream space is as real and as important as kind of the, I'm in Switzerland, so I should say that I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, of C.G. Jung, and I've kind of been devoted to his work for over a decade, and it's really influenced me and the way I think about creative work.
Before we talk about Jung, you talk about imagination, and there's an artist in the audience tonight who used to collect children's drawings.
Yeah.
And used to always tell me, give me your young kids' drawings, not the ones who are 12 or 14 or 15, but the ones who are 6 when they were really young.
Yeah.
And that she fed creatively off of that imagination that our youngest kids have. And just hearing you talk about imagination, I wonder, what's your thought about imagination and how we sort of live in a culture where imagination is great until you get to high school, and then high school, college, and beyond, it's all about work. We sort of suppress our imagination. Do you think about that? Do you think about imagination in that way? Is it a critical tool that we're not unlocking enough of and we should be more childlike with? Or
yeah, I mean, for me, play is really important, to kind of be in that childlike position and to actually have, even now I'm working on my second book, and really my aim every day that I go, to start writing is to come with that beginner's mind, that I don't know anything and I don't have any expectation of this, and I'm just here to play and imagine and explore into it. And we don't take it very seriously, but to me it's kind of a deadly serious thing, to really have that that real childlike curiosity, because I think that's where true innovation in form and subject matter, and that's where we can be really innovative.
That's where it comes from?
I think so. I mean, for me, it's really, beginner's mind is a huge thing. And it's where meditation is.
That's what it's called, beginner's mind.
It's a kind of a Zen, it's a sort of a Zen idea that you come to every moment, not just your creative work, but you kind of attend to every moment as a beginner, that you have that humility that you don't know anything, and you have no disappointment, you have no expectation, you just have pure curiosity. And it's from that kind of pool of pure curiosity that I think really magical things can emerge.
And you think it's hard. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying? That it's sort of harder. When you're a child, it's easy to access that place. And as an adult, it becomes harder. As a mother, when you're running a family or running a business or whatever, it gets harder to go back to that place. So you have to train yourself to do it, or you have to create the space, the opportunity for yourself. You do that daily or weekly?
Yes. I think on one hand, we have to kind of go back. You can't go back, but you kind of have to, of course, we have to be citizens of the world, and we have to be in society, and so we have to be civilized in some way, and educated, and we have to go through all the things we have to go through. But then, for me, it happened really around midlife even more, where I started to realize that I think it was also this kind of destabilizing of all these identities that I had clung to, and realizing that, okay, if I'm not a wife, then who am I? Okay, I'm a mother, but when my kids grow up, then who will I be? And okay, okay, I'm a writer, but I'm not really able to get anywhere with the second novel. So then, who am I? And that who am I think that question is a kind of a beautiful, it's very scary, but a very beautiful place to be able to start with really not knowing, where it's almost a place where you can start again every time.
Did you feel like, so Avni wrote the first draft of this book and she won a major award, and she got a literary agent all of a sudden. She went from someone in the art world to all of a sudden sort of leapfrogging all of these people who were trying to be writers. And when you got to that moment and you won that award, did you feel like, I know who I am now, I'm a writer? Did you feel this huge sense of accomplishment? How did that play out from that point forward?
Yeah, I was 30 or 31, and I was really, really arrogant and like sure of myself because I won this prize and it was an unpublished manuscript, and I was at this literary festival in India, and then there was a picture of me in the paper, and it was all very exciting, and I just said, oh my God, I'm a genius. I found my gift, my calling, like, you know, there are going to be people knocking at my door, and
there were a few.
There were a few, but very quickly then I found myself in the UK. I was in London, and I was sitting down with this agent. It was part of the prize that I would be signed with this literary agent. And she just kind of like handed me this printed manuscript, and she was like, okay, so now you need to rewrite the whole thing. And I was just so shocked, and I was like, okay, she clearly, and I had no idea. I had never taken a writing class. I had no idea.
You thought clearly she hadn't read this because you just won an award?
No, I thought she meant, well, I thought she meant, oh, you have to proofread it. You know, you have to do some spelling or maybe some grammar or maybe move some paragraphs around or, you know, add a little bit of description, flesh things out. I had no clue that very often editing is purely rewriting. It's purely just revisiting something in a totally different way. I had no idea about that, and so I tried to kind of send her a few like versions of it, you know, just kind of patched up. And every time she was like, "No, this is not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to throw this away and start again." And that was
humbling.
Yeah, that was humbling. I had to kind of realize, oh, okay, maybe I'm just very, very ordinary and not a genius. And that was a big, again, like that beginner's mind, right? Start from the beginning. Wow, I actually know nothing. I know nothing about this. And now I have, you know, I love the image of Sisyphus, and it's a popular image for writers, of Sisyphus, you know, pushing the stone up the mountain, and then, you know, the gods punish him, and every night it kind of rolls back down, and again he has to start, and that's really
what writing is.
That's really what writing is.
Well, it obviously worked, because after 8 drafts, you were
Yeah.
shortlisted for the Booker Prize.
Yes.
What was that like?
Ooh, that was surreal.
Did you then feel like you knew who you were?
You know, I was so shocked. I remember, and it was like in the middle of COVID lockdown, and I had just given birth. And I got this call from my agent, and I had to kind of lie down, my editor, and I had to just kind of lie down on the floor because I just didn't, it was surreal. I don't know how else to describe it. And then I realized in a way that also kind of means nothing, you know, because, okay, that happened, it's great, I'm very grateful for it, and then the next day you go to the page again, and again, you have to fail again, fail better this time. You know, it's just, you make a mess of it, you write clunky sentences, you know, you have conversations with agents and editors where they say, well, I don't, you know, and it's just, you get bad reviews, so it doesn't really change the kind of daily reality of the process, I think.
But it's still amazing. I read that your grandmother, who passed away now, was illiterate, and the idea that in one generation, in these 2 generations, that you've gone from a grandmother who couldn't read or write to you being shortlisted for the Booker is pretty astounding. I mean, that's something that's worth celebrating, I think.
I hope
Is
my
it
mom
not?
doesn't mind. I'm going to tell a story. So, one of my mom's sisters told me a story that, you know, I've just always had this passion to read and to write. I was like very bookish, extremely awkward. I was always sort of with a book in my hand, and then I would write in secret when I was young, and it was something I never really fully understood. And a couple of years ago, my mom's sister, she told me a story that when my grandmother was kind of a young mother herself, she, she didn't know how to really read or write. She wasn't kind of educated, and so her husband and her other relatives told her, we have to send your daughters to boarding school because you're an illiterate woman. What are you going to teach them? And according to my mom's sister, this was a kind of very deep source of pain for my grandmother. And I wonder to what degree, it's something I kind of fantasize about, I wonder to what degree our ancestors and our relatives and our foremothers and fathers, their unlived lives, their wants, their desires, their traumas and pains are kind of animated through us, or they kind of are the things that animate us. And I wonder sometimes if her pain at hearing that somehow brought to life in me this hunger for knowledge and books and reading. So, yeah, I don't know, but it's something I think about a lot. I feel in a way like there's something redemptive in this for her. I don't know. If you read the book, you'll see there's a lot of revenge, and I'm kind of a vengeful person in a way. Like, I have kind of a lot of fantasies of revenge and avenging, especially women. I have this fantasy of avenging women when they're wronged, and so I wonder if there's something kind of redemptive in this for her. I don't know.
Was she still alive when you were shortlisted for the book, or did she see that whole process play out?
She did. I don't, so my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and so I'm not sure exactly how much she understood what it was. I mean, there was a copy of the book in her house, and so I know she had a sense of it, and also the book is, the book is dedicated to my parents and also to her. So I hope she kind of understood what she means and what she meant to the whole process of writing the book. But I'm not entirely sure. But she, in a way, was sort of the inspiration for the book, because even though, memory is a really important central theme in the novel, and even though I was fascinated with memory always, and even in my life as an art historian and a curator, all the exhibitions I would curate, the kind of central pillar would be memory. But, memory as in the archive, or collective amnesia, or various ideas like that. So even when, I was always interested in that, and that was a part of the novel. And then when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, I was determined that I would be the one to save her, because it became clear, as we would speak to doctors, and we were researching, and there was nothing to do about it. There were some drugs that didn't seem to be very useful, and it was just unbearable to me, and I had it in my mind that I was going to save her. And so I just started researching everything I possibly could about Alzheimer's disease, and I even started looking at what they were saying outside of kind of mainstream medicine. What were they saying in terms of Chinese medicine and Ayurveda? What were they saying in functional medicine? And there I kind of found these tools or ideas, and I sort of presented them to the family, and they all told me to mind my business. And I think there was a kind of frustration, and I found that with that frustration, all this research and all the focus on Alzheimer's disease, it found itself into the novel. And so I think, again, there was that kind of outlet and expression that took place on the pages of the book.
And maybe in a way, I read in several interviews where you talked about your grandmother, you talked about wanting to save her, but maybe in a way, by writing about it, by putting it through your novel, you saved a part of yourself that was struggling with what was happening to your grandmother, that would not have happened without writing.
Yeah, maybe.
One final comment from me, and then I want to open up to questions. Had a great quote this morning, that sometimes you find that the characters you've invented are less innocent, something along those lines, that they become maybe, well, you just said you're a very revengeful person. I was going to say, did you find that the character the daughter took on her own personality, much less innocent than you would have wanted, or?
Yeah, first of all, when I started writing the book, I felt that I was writing, the narrator, as she was speaking, I felt, wow, well, she is very righteous. And it was only through the process that I started to notice her unreliability, that maybe she herself cannot fully be trusted, and how much, we all have stories. The way I see it is our stories and our memories are very rarely based on what's true. I think affect and emotion plays this very big role. I don't think there's really any kind of way we can know objective truth. I think we all have a kind of confirmation bias. We all have a way we see the world, and we understand everything that happens in accordance to that. It's not that we use our experiences in the world to build this thesis. I think we have the thesis, and then we decide how we want to look at life in accordance with that. And I think, the narrator in the book, she has a very particular relationship with her mother, and she feels maybe that she's been neglected, and she wants to finally, as an adult, have her say that this is what happened to me. And it's at that very moment that her mother is losing her memory. And so this person that she now wants to finally confront with what this life she's experienced has been is sort of no longer able to hold on to it in any real way. And I think, there's a kind of, there's a tragedy in that. But there's also, it always brings me back. We were talking, I think earlier, Georgie mentioned Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And for me, the scene that I can never stop thinking about is 100 Years of Solitude, where one of the Buendias, I don't know which one, so many of them, but one of them is, he's realized that the entire village is losing their memory, and all that can be done now is just label everything before they forget what everything is called. So they label the chair and the glass and the bottle and the table, and they're kind of, I imagine, sort of post-it notes everywhere labeling. And he continues this exercise until he realizes that there will one day be a moment when he forgets the kind of value of each letter. And that all of this desperate desire to pin down and remember and archive will have sort of been for nothing. And that all these memories that we're holding on to so tightly, every picture, everything, is just sort of fleeting and sort of dissolving right in front of us. And that image is always kind of with me, I think, yeah.
Well, I'd love to open up to you all. I've monopolized this time with Avni, which I apologize for. We have microphones, so if anyone has questions, Maxine will run around Cologne or Melis.
Thank you. Thank you for being from the heart. It was very connecting, although I don't know you personally. Thank you for that. I would like to ask about the title of the book, if I may. It's one of the strongest titles I've ever seen. It's visually, sensually provoking. I suddenly started smelling burnt sugar and saw that uneasy image and had some memory visuals of seeing burnt sugar. Could you elaborate on the choice of your title, please?
So I have to be honest with you, the title is the work of my genius editor, Hermione Thompson at Hamish Hamilton she's based in the UK, and she actually came up with the title because I originally was working with another title called Girl in White Cotton. So the book was first published in India, actually, and in India it still has the title Girl in White Cotton. And then when I sold the rights in the UK, and that whole publishing journey is another wild journey that I'm happy to talk to you all about later. But when I finally sold it in the UK, my editor made the point that, white cotton as an image, in the context of India in particular, white cotton has a lot of different resonances. So white cotton is the kind of fabric that ascetics wear. So you could say like a guru or the kind of followers of the guru might wear white cotton. It's also the kind of fabric of grief. So when people are in mourning, they wear white cotton. And so I was trying to capture that kind of an image in the title. And she said, for a Western audience, that title will not really resonate. They'll kind of picture a sort of, we kind of did a test run in her office, and everybody said they kind of imagined a girl in a wedding dress or something like that. I was like, no, that's not what I'm going for. So she said, I said, well, we can educate the audience with this title. And she said, you're not going to educate an audience with the title. She said to me, you'll educate the audience with the text. And in the text, there are plenty of images of white cotton where they will understand what you're saying. But she said, for the title, you have a second to grab them. So sugar is a very important kind of theme, image and sort of, an image in the book, let's say. So we liked this notion of sugar, and we wanted a title that would kind of capture the tension of the mother-daughter relationship, the sweetness, the bitterness, the light, the dark. Food, again, is a very important part of the novel, and I would argue also that, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, that my style of writing also, for me it's very important to evoke or kind of call upon all the senses of the reader when I'm writing. So there's like a lot of, I think, those kind of descriptions as well, sensory descriptions. So we thought that it was a good fit. But I'm really pleased you like it. Thank you.
Come on.
I like very much as a bad mother, because we all have to be good mother, and I wanted to know if you had a feel of energy and joy writing about that, a mean person. Did you feel some kind of joy, kind of,
Yeah.
Mm?
Yeah, writing the mean stuff is also fun, I mean, there's a deep pleasure in imagining what you can't act out, right? I mean, as I was saying, I'm just like, I'm kind of the good Indian girl, and so where can I live, all the unacceptable parts of me, and I think I could live them in the novel. And some of that was hard to write, but yeah, some of it, there was a deep pleasure, there was a joy, there was a feeling of being transgressive, I think, and I think especially in art, I imagine this for all kinds of artists, there's a pleasure in feeling transgressive within one's art, I think. And I think, motherhood is, right, it's that kind of last holy cow we have. So it is, of course, a joy to tear it down sometimes.
Well, you speak a lot about anger in your family, anger being passed on from generation to generation, and that writing for you was a way of actually handling your anger too.
Yeah, I'm very angry. I know that the days that I am not expressing my anger in that way, that I can.
You can feel it coming out.
Yeah, well, also then I express it to people, and then, so it's better if I write a little bit every day at least.
One more question? Tommy?
Avni, thank you so much for that, and Dennis. My question is going to the title of today's talk, Reimagining the Past in the Context of Family Matters. And I wonder whether you would be able to share a few thoughts on how in family situations, in patriarchies, matriarchies, there can be sometimes powerful figures who describe what happened in the family in the past and perceive it differently. Not everyone has read your book, but for example, in this book, you describe moments where the mother figure believes that she was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And how does reimagining work in fiction? How do you feel that people can, I guess, twist the past on the basis of their memories?
Yeah, I love this question. So, Javier Marias, the writer, he has this beautiful sentence in A Heart So White where he says, marriage is a narrative institution. And I would say, families are a kind of narrative institution as well. And I think being in a family, there's a sort of requirement of kind of lying on that Procrustean bed, where you have to sort of fit within the parameters and in a way be a little bit dismembered, that the parts of you that don't kind of fit within the delineation of what it is to be in that family, those parts have to kind of be cut off to some degree. And so I think in a lot of ways, the family requires a kind of loyalty. And that loyalty has to be, I think, at the expense of the individual. And in that sense, the family offers a kind of safety or a kind of idea of safety. But at the same time, there's this cost. There's this cost
tribute
of,
that has to be offered.
and I think narrative is a big part of that. Families all have their stories of who they are, and the people who have counter narratives are often the outcasts, are often the black sheep, are kind of left out of that kind of safe container. And so, for me, that was also sort of an important part for the narrator in the novel as well, that she had her say, that she kind of had to live in a way a sort of half-life, living a story that didn't quite fit her, that that didn't, almost like clothes that don't fit you very comfortably or that are a few sizes too small. And now how can she really be herself and kind of take up space and take up room in her own story. And so I think that's a constant tension that for me is really interesting. And I think I love writing about families because I think family is a way to, I think writing about families and individual relationships is actually, to me, the most interesting way to write about politics and about collectives. Because I think we can all portray certain things about our politics in public, but the way we behave to our families and in our intimate relationships when no one is watching, to me, that's really your politics. And so I think that those, and those kind of structures, that's what really is at play when we talk about society at large, the kind of structure that finds its origination in the family unit.
Thank you. Do you feel like that was at work in this book? What you just described? Were you trying to say something bigger about, I don't know, politics, about society?
Yes.
Okay.
100%, because, well, for one thing, I mean, in terms of patriarchy, one of the big criticisms I had from a man is that, there are no men in this book. Where are all the men in this book? They're kind of, and well, first of all, why is it necessary that men be a central part of every book? But for me, patriarchy forms, like, the men may not be the central part of the book, but but patriarchy is kind of the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. It's the entire architecture of the novel, and the women are kind of moving through those rooms. And you know, those are kind of the parameters in which they're living. And even in the relationships between the women, the kind of the pressure and the desires and the fears around who and what and how the men are living, it's all kind of implicit. It's all implicit. I think every conversation, you know, it's interesting because I think we, you know, whether you are trying to be something or trying to be the opposite of something. So like, for example, even in terms of the mother and daughter, you know, the daughter says that I'm nothing like my mother. She kind of wants to express this, that I'm nothing like my mother, I'm the opposite of my mother. But I think even in saying that, she is a kind of mirror image of her mother, because the mother is still the reference point, right? Now whether you're -1 or +1, you're still one step away from the mother, in either direction. So for me, I'm kind of aware that, you know, even in our complete denial of something or in our embracing of something, that reference point still kind of shapes, you know, shapes who we are and how we act in the world.
Well, thank you so much for the conversation.